We're standing right now in front of the Western Heritage Center building, the library building. The statue behind me is Frederick Billings, our town's namesake. Frederick Billings actually never lived in Billings, but he was there. He was instrumental when the town was created in 1882. He had been the president of the Northern Pacific Railway, which created the town of Billings. Frederick Billings is an amazing story. Depending on what part of the country you're from, there's a different Frederick Billings story. Basically, he comes out of Woodstock, Vermont. He gets his law degree at the University of Vermont. He heads to California for the 1849 gold rush, not to dig gold, but to settle land disputes and legal issues as a lawyer. He becomes San Francisco, California's first lawyer. He's California's first attorney general. He helps basically create the University of California at Berkeley, names the town of Berkeley after his favorite poet, Bishop Berkeley. So I think of Frederick Billings in the Bay Area as the gold rush lawyer. Here in the Northern Plains and in Billings, of course, he had been instrumental in his involvement with the Northern Pacific Railway. He helped basically lay the tracks from Bismarck, becomes president of the Northern Pacific Railway in 1879 through 1881. In 1882, the town of Billings is created. He gives his name to this community. So I have the gold rush lawyer, the railroad baron, and oddly enough, where he's best known is in Vermont. Vermont's only national park is the Marsh-Billings Rockefeller National Historic Park. It's also the only national park that's based on an ethic, the ethic of conservation. So he's really instrumental in the history of the U.S. over just a period of about 50 years. Billings got its name because I think Frederick Billings realized that this was going to be a fairly large community. Prior to the city of Billings and the city of Livingston, which is further upstream on the Yellowstone River, there were few permanent settlements in the Yellowstone River Valley. You know, native peoples had figured out how to survive on this landscape by moving to the rhythm of the seasons. What happened is the steamboats came into the valley and they were limited by seasonality, low water. And so it isn't until the railroad arrives in the Yellowstone River Valley in 1881 that you can really establish long-term permanent settlements. So you think of the Yellowstone Valley like beads on a string, and they basically plotted towns along certain sections of that string. So you have Glendive, then you have Miles City, then you have Billings, and then you have Livingston. So the railroad basically platted these towns out, you know, with some degree of hope for success. And I think that Frederick Billings most likely looked at where these towns were going to be platted and could see that being where we are today in the central part of the Yellowstone River Valley, that this was a town that had great potential. Frederick Billings and his wife Julia never actually spent time here in Billings, Montana, but they did send their son here. At the time that Parmley Billings lived here, 1884 to 1888, it was a very difficult period in Billings history. You know, the city grew up magically overnight, thus our name, the Magic City. But when Parmley was here, 1884 to 1888, it was a period where the city was quite unsettled. The civic leaders hadn't really established themselves. A lot of people maybe were investing in Billings, but they weren't investing in the long term. And so Parmley's letters reflect the difficulties that people had in the 1880s. And of course he would write home and complain about what a tough place this was to live. Why would anybody live in Billings, Montana? And of course he's writing to his father, who the town is named after. And basically what happened is the last 2 or 3 letters that Parmley wrote to his father and his sister, he was just saying that, you know, people are dying like flies here. And he used that phrase. He said every spring the sewage gas comes out of the ground. And he said eight women had died of stomach ailments the month prior to his last letter. And then in 1888, in the spring of 1888, on a return trip back to Woodstock, Vermont, he dies, age 25. In the spring of 1888, his father, Frederick Billings, our town's namesake, would die about a year and a half after his son's death. What's exciting about the Frederick Billings story is that, you know, just like any town, USA, you have a name on your town. And the beauty for us at the Western Heritage Center is, and other places that interpret history of this region, is that our job is to introduce people to our town's namesake. And once you learn the story of Frederick Billings and who he was, gold rush lawyer, railroad baron, conservationist, national parks named after him, there's a sense of pride, I think, that goes with the fact that you have somebody who had such an impact on a national level, whose story is not that well known.